Tim Walz just covered up $500 million in fraud in Minnesota because he gave it to Somalians instead of Americans. And Trump's DOJ is closing in fast. This story actually comes courtesy of two groups that are both quite surprising to me. You've got the New York Times, and then you also have the Minnesota Department of Human Services employees, which are mostly made up of Democrats. Everything I'm about to show you actually comes from people largely on the left. Even they are calling out what Tim Walz has done and showing that they want him in jail. And I don't think that's off the table either. The New York Times reports that with the influx of Somalian immigrants in Minnesota, Somalians essentially are creating fake companies to then bill the state's welfare system because they're taking advantage of it. And the numbers are staggering, by the way. The whistleblowers from the Minnesota government released this graph. They have personally been keeping track of all of the money embezzled. And this is the list. Most of it, as you can see, is through Feeding the Future, which is, the fake company that Somalians put up. And then you've got Medicaid, unemployment benefits, and SNAP. That's pretty much all of it. If you look at the bottom, this adds up to $500 million. This is tons of money. This is not just a small amount. And again, think about this. The Minnesota state government literally cut a check for $250 million to one organization that is at the top. And this is the education agency, by the way. The rest are from Human Health Services, which is the whistleblowers for the most part. They've tweeted all this out on X. You can go see it. It has 32 million views right now. So people are seeing this. And basically what you're seeing is that these funds have now been linked to Shabaab, which is a terrorist organization. The New York Times writes the following about this. They say, the first public sign of a major problem in the state's social services system came in 2022 when federal prosecutors began charging defendants in connection to a program aimed at feeding hungry children. Merrick B. Garland, Attorney General during the Biden administration, called it the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. So all of this started back during COVID. They continue. The prosecutors focused on a Minneapolis nonprofit organization called Feeding Our Future, which became a partner to dozens of local businesses that enrolled as feeding sites. Not real businesses, fake businesses set up by Somalians. They say state agencies reimbursed the group and its partners for invoices claiming to have fed tens of thousands of children. In reality, federal prosecutors said most of the meals were non-existent, and business owners spent the funds on luxury cars, houses, and even real estate projects abroad. So basically, this is Black Lives Matter again, except for instead of Black Americans, it's for Somalians. And they didn't take private donations and do horrible things with them. They took state Minnesota funds and bought sports cars and mansions with them. The article continues. It just keeps getting crazier. It continues. Behind the scenes, as federal investigators sifted through bank records and interviewed witnesses, they said they realized that the meals fraud was not an isolated incident. In September, prosecutors charged 9 people in 2 new plots tied to public funds meant for those in need. In one case, hundreds of providers were reimbursed for assistance they claimed to have provided to people at risk for homelessness, though federal authorities said services weren't provided. The program's annual cost ballooned to more than $104 million last year, the authorities said, from a budgeted projection of $2.6 million when it began in 2020. This is what the government does. You start at 2.6 for the needy. You say to yourself, yeah, that seems reasonable. I mean, that's not crazy. And what it turns into is $104 million for people who are not needy. That is why conservatives don't believe in public welfare. They believe in private welfare through normal citizens, as well as companies, as well as charities, churches, etc. They say this. 2 of 8 people have charged in the scenario have pleaded guilty. 6 others have pleaded not guilty and are awaiting trial. And another program aimed to provide therapy. This is crazy. I told you it keeps getting crazier. It does. Listen to this. In another program aimed to provide therapy for autistic children, prosecutors said providers recruited children in Minneapolis' Somali community, falsely certifying them as qualifying for autism treatment and paying their parents kickbacks for their cooperation. Holy crap. They literally pretended to be autistic to get welfare, guys. And the parents were then paid for that. This is why Biden's immigration system, was such a mess. Such a mess. They knew, these people knew, these Somalians knew, if we come to America, we act like we want asylum, we're going to get paid to come. I mean, we're just going to live off the government, which of course, living off the government is living off of your neighbors because the government doesn't actually make money. The rest of us are looking at this and we're thinking, why has everything gotten so expensive? Why is our life so expensive? Why is housing so expensive? Why are groceries so expensive? It's because you're paying for your cost of living and then also the 3 Somalian families in your neighborhood. That's especially true if you live in Minnesota. The New York Times continues. They say federal prosecutors say that 59 people have been convicted in those schemes so far, that more than $1 billion in taxpayers' money has been stolen in 3 plots that they are investigating. That is more than Minnesota spends annually to run its Department of Corrections. Minnesota's fraud scandal stood out even in the context of rampant theft during the pandemic when Americans stole tens of billions through unemployment benefits, business loans, and other forms of aid, according to federal auditors. So what they're saying basically is the fraud during COVID welfare was so bad, and this dwarfs that. This really looks bad. That's how bad it is. And we all know that COVID was a cluster, you know what, when it came to fraud and abuse. And here's the clincher through all of it, by the way. Tim Walz knew everything. This isn't just a few isolated people that were working together. We now have whistleblowers saying Tim Walz knew about it, that Kamala Harris knew about it, and did nothing. The Minnesota Department of Human Service whistleblowers tweeted this out just this week. They said, for public awareness, we did write to Kamala Harris and the DNC multiple times, warning them about Tim Walz and his incompetence, fraud scandals, and retaliation. By the way, they allege that Tim Walz actually told them that they would get fired for whistleblowing this stuff. They said, we tried our best to keep the public informed as our tweets are public. Maybe Kamala Harris turned a blind eye to fraud like her running mate. Again, these are Democrats, guys. These are not Republicans. They conclude, over the years, our messages have not changed. We need fraud to stop in Minnesota and good governance to be restored. That tweet, again, has 32 million views last time I checked. Huge scandal. People are seeing it. They've sent out other tweets fully blaming Tim Walz, saying he's part of the corruption, which is just a crazy revelation. Again, we know, Tim Walz is a pathological liar. Does this surprise me? No. But to actually see it, it is still shocking to see what he has done to Minnesota and Minnesotans. And frankly, what he's done for non-citizens, namely Somalians, who again are funneling this money to terrorist organizations. President Trump, he probably came out with my favorite tweet of all time on this. This is maybe my favorite one-liner ever from President Trump. This is what he tweeted out. He said, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state of Minnesota. Somalian gangs are roving the streets looking for prey as our wonderful people stay locked in their apartments and houses, hoping against hope that they will be left alone. And this is the best part of all time. He says, the seriously retarded governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, does nothing, either through fear, incompetence, or both. Fantastic. He finishes off, while the worst congressman/woman in our country, Ilhan Omar, always wrapped in her swaddling hijab, and who probably came into the USA illegally, cheers them on. Send them back to where they came from. It's over. Hopefully. In addition to the Somalian corruption, we also have breaking news that Jonathan Weinhagen, you probably never heard of, but he was the CEO of Minneapolis Chamber, huge Tim Walz ally. He is expected to plead guilty to wire fraud and embezzling $200,000 today. So, well done, Tim Walz. This is his legacy. This is what Democrats are doing on a state level, and you know it's happening on the federal level as well. And heck, let's not be partisan about this. Republicans are probably doing it on the state and federal level as well. And guess what? I don't care. That's why I actually really respect the New York Times. I don't know if I respect them as much as it's just their job to do this. But I do respect the workers who are Democrats who are whistleblowing this because it's not partisan. You cannot give away $1 billion to foreign nationals and expect someone on your side to defend you. No one cares. That is high crimes. That is treason. So here's what I hope with all of this, guys. Trump has 1 year left to work with Congress to pass more legislation. The reason why I say that is, unfortunately, the midterms are not looking good right now. And by the way, historically, they just don't look good for the incumbent party, obviously. So let's say right now that Congress goes towards Democrats. I don't think that that would be unreasonable to say. If that happens, legislation is stopped dead in its tracks. So I want Trump and Mike Johnson to really focus in on codifying his executive orders. However, after that, you're not going to get much done in terms of legislation. So what I want is for Trump to recognize that the executive branch is his. That doesn't get taken from him. And I hope he spends the next 2 years uncovering all of this stuff on a state level, because he can do that with the DOJ. Also on the federal level, because obviously he's the executive branch. He is the federal government. Tim Walz should go to jail. Somalians in Minnesota should be deported. Frankly, this might just be enough to flip the state red after the DOJ is done uncovering everything. The progressive left is a cult, guys. They do culty stuff. They do really scary stuff, and I write all about it in my book, A New Cult. Go check it out right now. It's actually on sale for Black Friday right now on Amazon. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching today's episode. Please like the video so other great patriots like yourselves will see it. And you can tune in every single weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show, or you can watch another video right here.